Howdy, y'all. Caleb here. This past weekend, I went to a tournament, had a nice 1 day, 3 game tournament, and decided to take a pretty fun list. If you watched the last video, you saw me talking about it, but I did take 70 warriors to a tournament just to see how they would go. Took a bunch of Glacian champions and had some fun. So here's my list. I talked about it a little bit on the last video, but let's recap this. I do have a Saurus Sunblood as my general, and I am taking this in Thunder Lizard so that I can get out of that command trait from Kotal's Claw, but also so I can double fire some Bastildons. So I do have a Saurus Sunblood as my general. That allows me to get the thickly scaled hide command trait so I could reroll his saves. Artifact of Griff Feather Charm for a 5-up ward. And the aspect of the champion fueled by Gurish Rage so that it can be revived again once he's killed. Just really trying to make this Saurus Sunblood as tough as possible to help me score some of those Glacian champion battle tactics and things. I don't think he died all tournament, and so he was in one really good combat, and made it through that one. A couple other times he got into combat, didn't die, and so I was happy with that. Salon Starmaster is my next hero with spell Stellar Tempest to do some horde busting if it needed it. A Skink Star Priest with Fusel of Conflagration to do some mortals. And the spell Hand of Glory to let me reroll hit rolls of 1 for a unit. I'm going to be trying to put that on my warriors if they're going to be in combat. If not, apply it to a Bastildon. And so we can help out the Bastildons that way too. Also, its Venom Staff is just, its a Venom Staff is required for Saurus Warriors to make them any good. So we apply that to the Saurus Warriors. And then I have another Skink Star Priest to do the same thing, to apply those mortal wounds to my warriors to make them a little bit scary in combat. I'm taking the spell Celestial Harmony so that I can avoid Battle Shock for my warriors. And it actually worked pretty good a couple times to where one time I had rolled basically if you roll 10 or higher, it goes out in a big bubble. Kept my entire army from Battle Shock and anything, so I could use my command points for other things. That was pretty nice. I do have 2 reinforced units of Saurus Warriors, all with clubs, and they're going to go into the Glacian Veterans, the 2 big groups are, so that they can fight in double ranks, and that way the clubs are worthwhile, so they have that rend, and you don't have to worry about the range. I took a unit of Terror Wings to kind of have some utility, and they have an ability that lets you, in the shooting phase, that's important, you can activate this ability, and you pick a enemy unit within 12 inches and roll 2 dice. If you beat their bravery, they can't use a command point for the rest of that turn. So that's all-out defense, that's Unleash Hell, that is Inspiring Presence. So if it goes off, that's huge, but you do have to beat the bravery. Little spoiler, it only went off one time, but that one time it went off, it was awesome. Worth 80 points? I don't know. In theory, it's an awesome ability. We'll talk about it as we go through the battle report. Behemoths, I took 2 Bastildons with solar engines, and in Thunder Lizard, obviously, they get an extra 2 wounds, and then you can double fire one of them. And so I'd be looking to spend a command point to double fire one of them, spend another command point on the other one to give +1 to hit. So you're getting some decent output without having a Skink Priest in the list. Not as good as you could have, but the Skink Priest just doesn't fit in this list with as expensive as he's gotten now. I do have core battalions of Command Entourage to get the extra artifact. Glacian Veterans so that the warriors can fight in ranks, and Battle Regiment just to lower the drops. And it was 7 drops, 120 wounds, and exactly 2,000 points. So that was my list for this tournament. Let's talk for a second. Maybe a bit of a spicy take. Probably not. I think everybody's realizing this at this point. But in this tournament, the book battle tactics for other factions made a huge impact. Maybe it was the way the game types we were playing. Maybe it affected the way my opponent played, but book tactics, even though in this tournament they were only worth 1 point. We're practicing for our big GT that's coming up. They still made a huge impact. You can definitely tell the books that have easy battle tactics versus ours, which are, I mean, just forget about them because they're almost impossible. Most the two that we have, one in each subfaction, is ridiculous. But some of these books have incredibly easy battle tactics, and even if they're only worth 1 point, like they are in our tournaments here, they're still worth it because there's going to be those moments where you don't have another battle tactic to take, and if you have access to book battle tactics, that's an extra point or an extra point or two, depending on what your meta looks like. So that does make a difference. It made a difference in these games. You know, if we weren't doing book battle tactics, maybe my opponent would have played different. I no doubt they would have. But having those available is definitely a have and have not for those armies that get them. Anyway, I'm not going to let that detract from the battle report. I think I played fairly well in my games. I had a lot of victory points, enough to place me up pretty high if we were just going off that. But I did end up going 1 and 2 on the day. Not exactly what I wanted to do, but scored a ton of points. Every game was really close, and that's kind of what you want. You know, this was definitely a fun list, taking 70 warriors, and so I wasn't disappointed to lose a couple games. That was about what I expected to happen with this many warriors. So, all right, let's get into game one. I'm playing against Ryan Givens, and he's bringing Ogre Maw Tribes. It's in Meat Fist, so he gets some extra mortal wounds on charges. And he's got a couple of Galatian champions, the Tyrant and the Slaughtermaster. And he's kind of decked out as Tyrant to be incredibly tough. Oh, let me zoom in on that so you can see that. He's decked out as Tyrant to be incredibly tough, kind of like my Saurus Sunblood. His Slaughtermaster to help him get some spells off. And a Frost Lord on Stonehorn with Arcane Tome and Flaming Weapon, just so he can get extra damage there. The units I was really worried about were these Iron Guts. He did have 8 Iron Guts in this list, as well as 2 units of 6 Ogre Gluttons. So he's got quite a bit of beef in those battle line units. And then 1 Iron Blaster to round it out for some artillery. He did take a Warlord Battalion, 119 wounds, exactly 2,000 points. And he came in at 7 drops as well. I ended up getting to deploy first, and so I was able to out-drop him and choose who got to go first. We were playing position over power, and this is the interesting battle plan where your flank objectives on the left and the right-hand side, if you haven't played this one yet, it's pretty interesting. You get an extra point if a Galatian champion is capturing those, and then they disappear in round 4, I believe. So I believe those disappear in round 4. These didn't really come into effect too much in this game. We were fighting each other so much in the middle. The deployments are so skinny on this board. And the terrain that we played on kind of funneled us right towards each other. And we had a good old melee fest. So it was pretty fun. Here's our deployment. You can kind of see these buildings that are funneling us down into this kind of V-shaped on our deployment zone. And that I almost wasn't able to fit my entire army in this because of the terrain. I would have had to put something behind these walls, and that would have just been horrendous. But he was in the same predicament too. He had a lot of big bodies over there, and so he had to put some stuff closer than probably what he wanted to. But I was seeing these Iron Guts here. This double reinforced unit of Iron Guts, or maybe single. I can't remember. Was right there in the front, and that was that almost 600 point unit that I was kind of afraid of, and so I wanted to make sure and put some damage on that unit. And I saw my opportunity here in turn 1 before he could really rush across the board and hit me either with the Stonehorn or with all of his ogres. And so I had lined up my Pterodons here in the middle, Terra Wings, in the middle of my deployment, and so that they could get across the board into his to where I can pop my ability on that first turn. So I did Desecrate the Lands, put them right next to that tower, tried to debuff those ogres with the Terror Wings, failed, but I was able to put all my shots, all my spells, all the damage, all the range damage I have into those, and was able to kill all but 2. And so if I had gotten the Terror Wings off, he wouldn't have been able to Inspiring Presence, and they would have run anyway. So that would have been nice if it had gone off there, but it didn't. Another reason I kind of chose to go first is I was able to buff up all my Saurus Warriors. I was able to get like Mystic Shield onto one unit. I was able to get Celestial Harmony off for basically the entire army. So I felt good pushing forward towards his army with these big blocks. And I was able to get the red Saurus Warriors here down on the bottom left. I had to run them, max run them, spend a command point on it to get one of those guys onto that flank objective on the left. Had just enough space to do that. With I may have done +1 to run from the constellation. I can't remember. Just enough to get onto that and score that objective, which helped me get an extra point from holding 1, holding 2, holding more, and get that early lead. In his turn, he was able to push across the board with the iron guts that he had left. This was before shooting, I think. The big thing was he brought his Stonehorn forward and was able to fly right over the top of my Saurus Warriors and pop some mortal wounds into the Bastildon. But I did have a ward save because of the terrain, and I was actually able to keep the Bastildon from being bracketed off of his mortal wounds on the charge. So on his pile in is what that was. So he's able to like pile in across a monstrous action and do some mortal wounds. So didn't do enough to bracket him, which was huge because then I was I think in combat I got the roar off and he didn't, and so I was able to all out defense the Bastildon. He was trying to put a bunch of damage into the Bastildon to kill that thing off, and did some damage, but not enough to take it out. And so I was able to counter hit with all the warriors. They didn't do as much damage as I had hoped in this first turn, but the Stonehorn was tied up here for the next turn, so that was good. You can see kind of how it ended here. He brought another big unit, the other unit of Ogors, like 6 of them, down into the warriors. And because he attacked with the Stonehorn first, I was able to attack with all my warriors, and I was able to kill off. I think that whole unit, he may have had something, it may have had 2 left or something that fought on a little bit longer, but whatever it was a pretty big blow. And then on priority, I was able to get priority into turn 2. If I hadn't gotten that, he probably would have killed off the Bastildon, but because I've got that priority into 2 and was able to keep my warriors buffed up, I was able to take out the Stonehorn there in turn 2. So we had enough shots going into it, and all the warriors doing their mortal wounds. I mean, when you get that whole block of warriors going into something, it's a lot of dice. And so they were able to chew through those wounds with both Bastildons shooting into them. So after that, it was pretty much, game over. He had 2 foot heroes and the Iron Blaster, but hadn't really even been able to take another objective yet. And so he still had the 1 block of Ogres, but they were out of the fight heading towards the other objective if he ever wanted to grab that one. So at that point, it was cleanup time, and we were able to call it. It may have been a turn or 2 after this, but really it came down to that Stonehorn fight right there in turn 1 and turn 2. That I think turned the fight my direction. So great game with Ryan. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully, I think he was new to our scene here at this tournament, so I hope to see him out again at another tournament. Running a pretty fun list there with Ogre Maw Tribes. All right, on to game 2. Game 2, I'm playing against John Early, and I've played him before. I think we played maybe last tournament, and I think I beat him last tournament. He was playing Flesh Eater Courts, the same, a fairly similar list to what he's running on this one. And I think I was able to beat him last time because I had Gotrek in my list, and I made an excellent charge with some Knights, a reinforced unit of Knights, and was able to kill off a Flare unit, and then Gotrek got into the other Flare unit and killed him off. This one went a little bit differently. Incredibly close game. Great game here. But it's a very similar list. He's got a couple of foot heroes here with the Infernal Courtier. This is Flesh Eater Courts. Abhorrent Archregent with Tunnel Master, which was critical for later. And a Royal Zombie Dragon there with the Ghoul King on it. And then the real teeth of this list are these 2 double reinforced units of Crypt Flayers. So 9 Crypt Flayers just an incredible amount of output there with the crit flares. They are in the Galatian veterans, so they can fight in that double rank, and they can just roll a ton of dice at you, especially if he gets off all his spells that buff him up. And if you do chip damage to them, they don't care because they're just going to resurrect and come back in their turn. So you have to wipe that unit, otherwise you'll see it back at full strength. We are playing Path of Champion, which is an interesting one. It's set up like this, kind of your deployment zones are in the corners, and those objectives that are not in anybody's deployment zone, if you have a Galatian champion on them and you're going second, you can pick 2 battle tactics. And so we had an interesting counterplay here. Every time it was priority roll, John, either I would win it, or if he would win it, he would go second because he wanted those extra battle tactics. And he had enough battle tactics and enough flexibility. This was just good play by him to be able to capitalize that and score. I think he scored an extra 3 or 4 extra battle tactics. And so he was able to do that. I think he had used there towards the end, I think he used one of his book battle tactics as well. And so that was helpful there. I was, by the end of the game, I was running low on battle tactics I could accomplish, and he had already doubled up on a couple of them. So great play there by John, and good strategy. Here's our deployment. You can kind of see the corners of our deployments here, and I've got my warriors poised to kind of make a push towards this top objective. So I've got 2 Galatian champions. I'm gonna try to get onto that objective with 2 Galatian champions, and so I can utilize that if I can later in the game. I've got my Terra Wings positioned to where they can reach either. It doesn't look like it from here, but they can either tag that unit or the right hand Flayer unit with their ability. From that, they have a 12-inch move. I'm generally going to run them because I'm not going to get them into combat, and their ability isn't actually a shooting attack. It's just a shooting ability. It's just ability that happens in the shooting phase. So I run them, and then they have a 12-inch ability. So it's pretty cool. This bottom one, I'm almost kind of giving up on this right objective. I'm making a push on the other 2. So I've got 1 small unit of warriors that's going to push over to that way to score that objective if I'm given the first turn. Which he outdrops me, and so he does give me first turn. I'm able to move out and take the board. But I wasn't able to do much damage. My Terror Wings failed their ability, which actually didn't really matter. He didn't use all-out defense. He was saving his command points for later. And my Basildons, I think I killed like 2 Flayers. That was it. Just not a real good round there for the Flayers, or for the Basildons. And in his turn, he healed back all the damage I had done. So it was a good choice for him to take second, make me go first, even though I have shooting, because he's able to negate everything I did. So I was able to get enough on the board, but my run on this top unit of warriors just wasn't quite good enough, and I didn't get far enough up there. And on his turn, he's able to summon in 2 Galatian champions onto this objective, because I couldn't get far enough up with these guys to block that out, and he's able to summon in 2 Galatian champions, which is just so cool that Flesh Eater Courts can summon Galatian champions. And great strategy there, summoning them on the objective. Now he's got 2 on it, and he's able to pull flayers over into these warriors. He plays a little bit more cagey with these flayers over here, and he just takes the objective from me, from these warriors, but doesn't engage them yet. And so he's able to bring those flares over and attack my warriors. Oh, there's my run. Not very good run. And he's able to come in behind and hit all these warriors with those flares. He's able to attack. He does have to attack twice to kill off the warriors. I did have him buffed up some. But he's able to remove that unit. I think I got the next, I don't remember. No, he may have gotten the next turn, but, on this one, this was great. I can't remember whose turn it is. I don't remember where this picture's from. The important part is the Saurus Sunblood survived 2 full combats with 9 Crypt Flayers. So on his first activation, he couldn't get them all in. Only got about half of them in, and then he did the feast day or feeding frenzy or whatever it's called ability where they can fight again, and they pile in again. And this time they were able to get just about all of them in, and he survived. I didn't even have to revive. He had 1 health left because I did have all out defense on him, and so he was on a 2-up rerolling 1, and then had a 5-up ward save, and so just an absolute tank there. That's kind of what I built the list for. Was like, I want to see how long this Sunblood can last in combat, and this was by far the biggest test he faced all day, and passed it in flying colors. The important part was he was able to, by not dying in combat, he tagged this unit down for my next turn, and they couldn't move, and then I was able to move in and take that unit out. I can't remember if I shot it or not, but whatever it was, he wasn't able to move it and block. And, I mean, tagging something up in combat is fantastic. Oh, after my next turn, I retreated. This guy was free. He moved back onto this objective, I think. And I was able to get the Terror Wing off on his Zombie Lord. Let me see if there's a picture where he moved that thing. He moved the Zombie Lord over into this objective, and my Terror Wings were able to hit it and roll above its bravery, and then I charged in my warriors and took it out. And so at this point I was feeling pretty good, and I think this game came down to who got that next priority. And I think I had gotten that one, and I was lined up to shoot his flayers, and I was feeling good. I had all the buffs going. I had some warriors to finish him off. I shot him down to like 1 or 2 flayers left. Just whiffed hard on the last activation of the Sildon and left one alive. And lo and behold, on his next turn, he literally brings all of them back. If I could have finished off those flares, then I think it would have been game over. But just couldn't quite get it, and he brought them all back. At that point, let's go back to the board here. At that point, he's been able to score 2 battle tactics on the turns that he's gone second, and it comes down to that very last priority roll, and he gets it. And all he has to do, literally all he has to do, is retreat onto his own objectives, and he can sit there and score them. So I don't have enough speed at this point to get over there. My warriors, he's retreated these top 2 heroes up here back to his objective. I had sent some Terror Wings into his objective to try to steal it, and I think I was able to capture his objective 1 turn with the Terror Wings. That was pretty cool. But he was able to get back on his objective, take that back, and basically just play defensive on the last turn and able to win it that way. So he ended up winning by 3 points. Came down so close to just like 1 flayer dying or 1 priority roll. It was so much fun. Always a pleasure to play John, and what a heck of a game there versus Flesh Eater Courts. So had a lot of fun with that one. And on to game 3. Game 3, I'm playing against David Lewis. And he is playing Slaves to Darkness. And he's, man, I can't tell you what half this stuff means. Brand new book, so he's got the lots of different marks of chaos going on here. But he has 4 champions that are all Galatian champions, and so is able to really utilize those battle tactics that come down to that. Plus, he had some great book battle tactics that he used for 2 or 3 different turns, and able to get that. So Exalted Hero of Chaos, Chaos Sorcerer Lord, and something or other Blackwing. I think that's a teleporting one, or deep striking one. But had some different marks there to give his big units abilities. So he's got a big unit of Chaos Warriors. These things are just almost impossible to kill. They have the Mark of Nurgle, which I think gives them a ward save maybe. And just absolute tanks. I think I think he could have played them a little bit more aggressively, to be honest. He played them back a little bit more. I think if he had played them a little bit more aggressively, it would have turned the game much faster into his favor. Splinter Fangs. He had 3 units of Splinter Fangs, all marked with corn, so they get extra attacks when they charge. These things are like imagine warriors that do mortals on 6s, like think Saurus Warriors. They do mortals on 6s, have more attacks, and when they die, they come back at half strength. They're faster. That's basically what Splinterfang are. So you can definitely tell this is a new book unit versus, what we're fighting with. Definitely a good unit there for incredibly cheap. Then we had these Ogoroids, these reinforced 2 units of reinforced Ogoroids. I liken this to Croxagore. This is what Croxagore needs to be. He's got a marked corn so that when they make the charge, now they're doing even more damage. And I think he had a spell or more attacks. I think he had a spell that was giving them even more attacks. And they're doing 3 damage each. So these things are beefy and can do an immense amount of damage, all at -2 rend. So very, very scary. Just copy and paste this war scroll and these buffs over to Croxagore, please. He also had a warband that did some teleport and stuff. Right at 2,000 points. So a lot of wounds in this army. And everything can output damage in melee. There's almost no shooting, but he's got a ton of melee. We were playing Jaws of Galais, which is this really weird deployment here. This L-shaped deployment. And this actually comes in vital because I didn't realize it till later. We made a huge mistake at the end of the game. The only battle tactic he had at the end of the game that he could accomplish was desecrate the lands, and we accidentally desecrated the lands on a piece of terrain that was not in my territory. So that would have actually swung the game into my favor, and I would have won. It's not a big deal. It's just a local tournament. But that's one of those things that goes, why didn't we think about that? That was our, 3rd game of the evening. We were tired. Who I'm gonna blame? I'm blaming GW for this ridiculous deployment. We just kind of assumed our territory was all the way across and didn't even look at the battle plan at that point. So that was goofy. Oh, another thing about this battle plan, these objectives disappear. So whoever goes second removes an objective starting in turn 2. So by the end of the game, we only had 1 objective left, which was pretty crazy. Made for some interesting decisions, and it came down real close. By the end of this game, in the app, he had won by 1 point. Once we realized that the deployment zone wasn't actually all the way over there where he desecrated the lands. It should have been the other way, but it was a 1-point game, whichever way it goes. So that's always a fun one. When you play it down to 1 point, you can't ask for a better game of Warhammer than that. So 1-point game is always fun. So here's our deployment, and I have a unit of warriors. This terrain here is kind of hemming me in. So I've got my castle of Bastillons back here guarding my objective. And I'm going to take 1 big unit of warriors over to each other one, while I let my Pterodons and Saurus Warriors go clog up the middle a little bit. Then whichever side I can make a win on, then I'll push towards the middle with that unit of warriors. You can see his Chaos Warriors are there in the back, and his Ogoroids are all massed up there at the top, headed towards that objective. And then he's got these smaller units of Splinter Fangs, which will, do more damage to my warriors up there. So, let's see, what do I have? Okay, turn 1, I had to go first, and so I'm trying to make a play towards the Ogoroids. I take my Terra Wings and try to debuff the Ogoroids so that I can make them battle shock off. Can't let them all out defense. But of course, the Terra Wings fail that. But I'm able to get my warriors into position and and take off this Splinter Fang unit over here. I do kind of out punt my coverage of my my support heroes here, leaving them kind of out in the open. I know he has that teleporting unit, but had to be done. Couldn't let him charge me. So is what it is. But by the end of this, I'm able to take out, this big unit of Splinter Fang, or these 2 units of Splinter Fang over here, and this one, most of this one over here, which of course he brings back over the course of the game in half unit. You can see he brings in his Ogoroids here, and the Warriors, I mean, they try their best, but those things are just doing so much damage. I am reducing it by 1, but they have a ton of attacks, and so they're able to take out that unit there. I think in retrospect, he was pulling some book tactics out, so he probably didn't have to play quite as aggressive. Maybe if he didn't have these book tactics to play with, he might have been a little bit more aggressive with these Chaos Warriors. But he left these Chaos Warriors over here out of the fight for, most of the game, and I think I would have pushed them down further on this right-hand side and engaged the Chaos Warriors. He's going to win that fight every time against the Saurus Warriors. And so I think he could have pushed it more aggressively there. You can see the Splinter Fang have come back to be a pain over and over again. These Ogoroids are starting to disappear, but I've got to deal with this unit on that side. And my Basildons are pushing forward just to keep him off my objective if he pushes through. I got the next turn, and it was able to send in the Ogoroids into the Basildons, which I'm okay with. I had one on, I think I had a Mystic Shield on one maybe, and all out defense on the other one, and I was able to keep these things roared for most of the time they were into me. And so his big rend wasn't really a big problem. He busted one of the Basildons down a little bit, but the other one was staying full health, I think. And eventually I was able to chew through those Ogoroids with enough shooting from these 2 Basildons. You see what's being willowed down there, and I'm out of warriors. I've got this Skink Priest kind of running around doing a whole lot of nothing, but trying to stay in the way. And eventually his Chaos Warriors engage my Saurus Warriors. And I think I was actually able to attack with all my Saurus Warriors first. And I mean, they do a ton of damage, but I wasn't able to hardly kill any. I think I killed like 4. So they're tough. They're tough, even with like mortal wounds and stuff. You can see. And then I think he even rallied some back. Here's how turn 5 ended, or here's how turn 5 was in and up. And you can see that my strategy here, I had to rush towards the middle objective. That's the only objective that was left. At this point, we've burned them all, and we were running a tied game here pretty close. So I ran my Basildons onto that objective, got my heroes onto it, and basically screened out with these warriors so that he could not get his Chaos Warriors anywhere onto the objective to take it. So his only option, he had some Splintered Fang he had brought back up behind this tower here, was bring them down, but they weren't going to be able to capture the objective. So I think he respawned them over here on this right-hand side. This objective was gone at this point. And here's where we made the mistake. His grand strategy was to have more units in my territory, which he could do because I had to run everybody that objective to hold on to that one. And so he was going to score the... keep me from scoring my grand strategy, and he was going to score his, which wasn't a big deal because he didn't have a battle tactic to take until he said, well, I'm going to desecrate the lands on this building. And at this point I was like, dang it. Okay. Desecrate the lands, and that wins you by 1 point. And in retrospect, when we look back at the map, that building right here, which is the one he was desecrating, is on the other side of that battle, that objective. Let's go back to the map here. You see, yeah, it's not in my territory. Oops. Mistake made. But that's okay. It was a heck of a game. A heck of a game. Like this is basically everything that's left on the board is just these models right here. And it was a 1-point game either way it went. So that was a lot of fun. So Slaves to Darkness is no joke. They have some very good units, but I feel like I played pretty well, played them down to 1 point either way, and I was happy with that. So good stuff there from all of them. So like in conclusion, looking back at my list, I think I never used Fueled by Gurish Rage. Almost needed to use it against the Flayers, but didn't. I think I would switch that out. I think that I would switch that out and do Tunnel Master. Yeah, I think so. Because because I think I needed the movement. There's nothing in this list that allows much movement, and I think with Thickly Scaled Hide and Griff Feather Charm, you can send him off on his own, and he's going to be tough enough to withstand most, chafe units or most battle line units that are going to be making plays for those far objectives. So I think I would switch out that aspect of champion for a Tunnel Master. I never once used his ability for +1 to wound, just because if I'm got my warriors in combat, one unit I'm using all out defense on, and the other one I'm using all out attack on, and so I never had a chance to use his +1 to wound. Hopefully in our book that gets updated to something a little bit more useful, or to where we can stack those things on a unit. Slan did what Slan does. He will make you feel real good when you roll high on Comet's Call, and make you feel real foolish when you've put all this money into a Comet's Call and he rolls one unit for one mortal wound. That's frustrating. But hey, I mean, he's there for the utility, extra command points, unbinding things. I think I had one turn where I unbound every single spell Feck put out there. Or he failed them, and then I unbound the ones he passed. So that's always nice. Skink Star Priest did what they did. I didn't really ever lose a Star Priest unless I had already lost the Warriors. Now, I didn't face anybody that had Sharpshooters Battalion, so I would probably lose them in a Sharpshooters Battalion if I was going up against that, where they can shoot those Galatian champions. But as it was, I never lost them, which is kind of unique. Normally, those guys get killed pretty quick. And so, of course, I didn't really face much shooting. The Iron Blaster probably would have targeted him if he could have. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of shooting. So, Saurus Warriors did good. They weren't bad for 300 points for 30 wounds. When properly buffed, they can throw out a lot of dice. You got to play them kind of wide. You got to get them those buffs. And against the right matchups, they do well. So, Terror Wings, if you got 80 points and you're looking for something, do it. It's worth it for the screen, for the movement, for the special ability. If it goes off, then it's well worth it. Getting it to pop off against that Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon was worth 80 points right there, because that helped me kill him. Basildons do what Basildons do, so yeah, they're worthwhile. They're not gonna destroy the other person's army, but over the course of 5 rounds, they're gonna do enough damage to make up their points. So overall, I was happy with the list. It was definitely fun to see the Warriors out there. I think they may see the shelf for a little bit as we're nearing the Battle Tome. Hopefully, sometime in the next few months, we'll get our new Battle Tome out, and we'll see how Saurus looks in those. But Saurus Warriors for 300 points, it ain't terrible. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.